Fox's Nate Foy reports.
The man who is now identified as a suspect, previously a person of interest, but now there are warrants out for his arrest, 8 counts of murder right now against Robert Card. The reason why it's 8 counts rather than the 18 is 10 of the victims have yet to be identified. Police say that he went into a bowling alley here in Lewiston, Maine at 6:56 last night and murdered 7 people with what looks like a semi-automatic rifle. 12 minutes later, went into a billiards bar and restaurant, according to police, and murdered 8 people. And then 3 people who were brought to hospitals later died.
The Senate Banking Committee holds a hearing in connection to funding that may be supporting terrorist groups. Committee member Senator Katie Britt says the committee has authority over economic national security tools to prevent those responsible for the attacks on Israel from happening again.
This committee is also responsible for providing oversight to ensure that every administration enforces the laws that safeguard our national security and the security of our allies.
Senator Britt is calling for Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to testify before the committee about funding in the Middle East. Many students walked out of classes yesterday in protest of Israel and what students call Gaza genocide. Zachary Marshall of Campus Reform says it's because students have been misinformed by people, namely college professors. So what can parents and faith leaders do about this?
Read as much as you can and share resources with kids. So for an adult who likes books, that means buying books that tell the truth about Israel. Look for the author's social media and make your kids follow them, because that's the only way they're going to get out of their Gen Z bubbles.
Examples of walkouts include Florida State University and New York University. The Israeli military is claiming a major Hamas figure has been killed. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from southern Israel.
Shadi Baroud, a deputy commander inside Hamas, the deputy to Yahya Sinwar, the military leader of the entire organization, was killed in an Israeli airstrike. This is significant because it shows how the Israelis are continuing to target the heads of Hamas.
Thousands of gun safes are being recalled after news of a child's death. Here's Kristen Goodwin to explain.
The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission reveals Fortress Safe has recalled 61,000 gun safes that use fingerprint reader technology, citing a programming flaw. The recall targets the Fortress biometric safes, lockboxes, and gun cabinets sold under the names Cabela's, Gettysburg, Legend, Range and Field, and Fortress. The commission saying the user can believe they have properly programmed the biometric feature when, in fact, the safe remains in the default open mode, allowing anyone, including children, to gain access to what's inside.
Students in a town in the African nation of Malawi sent a forceful message to the abortion cartel. Charlie Butts reports.
Human Life International has visited the same high school in central Malawi to talk to the students and convince them to wait until marriage for intimacy. HLI's Dr. Brian Close explains what they taught.
You don't have to worry about unwanted pregnancy or AIDS or sexually transmitted diseases. You don't have to worry about loss of reputation or your self-respect, what others will think, especially your parents. Have to look around for an abortion. Often we find that there's a lot of violence and breakup of a relationship that gets sexual too young.
And then there's the young girl who is pregnant, the father deserts her, and she's left to support a child in poverty. The presentation was made by respected people.
When you have a priest and a doctor come before them and say, hey, look, this is the real skinny here. This is going to happen to you if you get involved in sex too soon, and we don't want that to happen to you. It'll happen. You just got to wait a few years. It'll happen when you get married. So don't rush things and don't ruin your lives.
Representatives of Planned Parenthood International arrived another time with false information and to promote their biggest service, abortion. The same students ran them out of the school and off the property.
Be sure and check out afn.net for more news. For American Family News, I'm Bronson Woodruff.
Can we trust the Bible?
He says, we saw this, and that sets the Bible apart from almost everything else in the ancient world and its religious pantheon of gods and goddesses.
The God Who Speaks, the important documentary from the American Family Association, is now available to watch for free on AFA's brand new streaming platform. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to watch this award-winning film today. thegodwhospeaks.org. we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks so much for joining me today. You can learn more about what we do on an activity basis on the front lines of the culture war by going to patriotacademy.com. That's where we're training Constitution coaches across the country to be the catalyst for a restoration of biblical values and constitutional principles, and you can be the one that does that right there in your church, in your neighborhood, in your community. It's very easy to do. You don't have to know anything about history or the law or the Constitution. We'll train you on all that. More importantly, you just got to get people in the room and hit play, and our classes will absolutely educate. They entertain while they're doing it. These aren't boring Constitution classes. They're the only Constitution classes known to mankind that you will not sleep in. I know. I slept through history in high school and college. Same with government, and didn't get interested in it until later in life. People are hungry for it now, though, man. They want to know. They want to know how to restore this country and how to bring back the values that made the nation great in the first place, and we're teaching people how to do that, and we're asking you to come alongside us. So check that out today, patriotacademy.com. Sign up to be a Constitution coach. It's free. Free. How about that for a price, huh? Free for you to be able to do this. So we'll train you for free. You get the classes for free. Your students get to attend the class for free. I don't know how it gets any better than that, but check it out today at patriotacademy.com. Sign up and get your class started soon. I mean, this is no time to kick the can down the road. This is no time to just, wait until, it feels better or whatever excuse you might be using. Right now, get signed up today. All right, I'm going to jump right in. We've got a special guest today, Neil Mammon, and I'm super excited about this because, there are tools that we desperately need to be able to be effective in reclaiming the culture and equipping the church and getting people into the right churches is essential. Neil Mammon with us, author of Jesus Was and Is Involved in Politics. Why Aren't You? Why Isn't Your Church? And a fantastic new tool. I get asked almost every day from somebody somewhere in the country, either one of our Constitution coaches, a listener to the program, whatever it might be, man, I cannot find a non-woke church in my community. Well, Neil has got a great tool that we're going to be telling you about today, mychurchfinder.org. Neil, God bless you, man. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me. What an honor.
Man, I am super excited about this tool because, like I said, I get asked all the time. And, of course, we used to have a Black Road Regiment website and a map on there with churches where, with churches that had, basically said, I want to be on there. But what you guys are doing takes it another step further. You're basically like the George Barna of church finding because you actually get these churches and pastors to fill out questionnaires, and you really identify where they are on biblical issues. So this is super cool and very much needed. And I'm just thrilled to have you on because we've shared the stage a couple of times and seen each other at various events. And I remember walking into an event you were speaking at in Idaho, I don't know, a year or two ago. And as you're giving the presentation, I'm like, who is this guy? I need to know this guy. And so, man, been wanting to connect with you more and get you on the program. It's just cool to have you, brother.
Thank you. It's great. We've known about your ministry through lots of different people that keep telling us, you need to go to Patriot Academy, you need to connect with Rick, and so it was great to actually meet you in person. So,
well, I still have
God bless you for what you're doing.
I still have your clicker, and I'm not giving it back for our listeners. And Neil loaned me his remote. I could not find mine. He's like, "Hey, man, just use mine. You can have it." And it's been more than a year, and I still have it. So thank you. It's working out great. So, and by the way, for our listeners, a little bit of your background. You're an engineer, got tons of patents, all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of like our founder, David Barton, who came out of, he was very much like, science and math and that sort of stuff, not history. And yet, God moved him into this arena 30 years ago. So it's kind of interesting, similar type story. So, yeah, give us your background, kind of what you do normally and how you ended up getting so involved in this.
Yeah, so I was born in Ghana in Africa, and I grew up in Jamaica, Sudan, Yemen, Ethiopia, and my parents are from India. My dad is a professor in physics. He's now retired, and so I grew up to add to that, I grew up in a Marxist family. Wow. I have some very famous Marxists in our family back in India who were in the leadership of the Marxist movement. And even though my family is Christian and dates its heritage back to 51 AD, when St. Thomas came to India and converted a bunch of pagans. So we date our heritage back, and our church is called the Marthoma Church. So it's a long heritage, but my dad's generation had bought into the whole Marxist philosophy. You know, it was in the 1950s and stuff like that. So but my dad, by the time I was about 5, my dad had become a Christian and gone back to the faith of his father, if you will. And yet I did still have cousins who were communists. And interesting enough, I had not cousins, uncles. I still have cousins who are communists, essentially. But I had 2 uncles who were actually considered both Christians and communists. And it's a different kind of. It's an interesting combination. I
mean, that's hard to reconcile. But I guess it depends on how biblical you are versus being Christian. Exactly. I wonder if that was the difference.
Well, the difference is they took God's call for taking care of the poor and extended it to the government must take care of the poor, which is the opposite of what God is telling you. The Bible tells you that, if you look at the story of the Good Samaritan, he doesn't say, I'll go out and get some IRS agents and go beat up your neighbors and collect taxes to pay you for the rest of the money.
That's a great way to describe it. Yes.
He says, I'll pay you the rest of the money. You don't even need to pay any of it. Right. So that was a mistake on that. But so anyway, but I grew up, I came to America, and I was kind of socialistic when I came to America. I got my master's degree in solid-state physics and electrical and computer engineering, and then started working in Silicon Valley, started a few companies. But all through this thing, I was through the early days, I was kind of socialistic in my principle. Even though I was a Christian and a believer, having grown up in a scientific family, I also tied my faith. It had to be provable. So I would, so in other words, I have a ministry called No Blind Faith. We teach apologetics. And that's because of my upbringing with my dad, who was a professor in physics. And so the question was never, is science opposed to faith? No, science, you use science to shore up your faith, right?
Amen.
Because you have a rational faith, not a blind faith. So I grew up in that, and yet I kept losing all these arguments politically. I was against guns. I thought the government should take care of people. And I kept losing all these arguments. I said, most people it's the other way around. I said, I've applied science to my faith. I need to apply it to my politics. Look at reason and facts. And of course, by that point, once you start doing that, you end up being pretty conservative.
So, what you're saying is if you actually think and use logic, there's really only one direction
exactly.
to end up.
There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
To look, I mean, it sounds good. Yeah, we should feed everybody. The government should take money to feed everybody. But then the sad thing is the government feeds itself 85% of that money they give it, and then maybe 15% gets to the poor person. Guess what? It's in the government's interest to keep more poor people from coming so they get more money. Because 85% of $1 trillion is a lot more than 85% of $1 billion. So they're going to try shooting for that goal, right?
Yep.
So this led to the fact that I actually became alarmed at what was happening in America. And I looked around and I said, wow, most Christians I know are just like me. They're pretty socialistic in their viewpoint. And so I started teaching people and talking to people and arguing. And I thought, look, in India, the Marxists felt that the church needs to be involved in politics as long as they were teaching Marxist policies, right? So they had no problem with bringing politics into the church. And as you know, the left does that all the time. So when I came here, I was like, well, why isn't the right doing it? Why aren't the conservatives doing this? And it just shocked me. And since I came from outside America, it never occurred to me that I should never mix politics and religion. It just never, of course you mix politics and religion. Everybody does. The Muslims do. I grew up in the Middle East, right? So everything is politics and religion.
Yeah.
And so why aren't we doing it here? And every time I talked to Christians, they either didn't know why, or they would say, well, Jesus was never involved in politics. And I thought, that's interesting. Well, I never thought about whether he was or not. But who was he involved with, right?
Literally put you on a journey. I mean, that led you to write the book.
Exactly. And so the first thing I realized, I remember talking to somebody, he says, well, wait a minute. Who was the governing board in Judea? I mean, if Jesus wanted to get involved, somebody said, look, he didn't get involved in Roman politics. Well, he wasn't a Roman citizen. right? So he wouldn't get involved in Roman politics. So what was he? Well, he was a Jewish citizen. Okay, so they had politicians. I mean, we know that the Romans were governing Judea, but that didn't mean they ran everything, just like when we were governing Iraq. We didn't run everything. That's our local politics. Just the top level was Pilate, right? So who were the people below him? Well, who talked to Pilate? Well, there was a group called the Sanhedrin, and they were the leaders. They were the Jewish legislators. They made the law for Israel. And I go, well, who are the members of the Sanhedrin? And did Jesus ever talk to these people? And suddenly I realized, wait a minute, the members of the Sanhedrin are the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And Jesus talked to them.
Boy, did he.
Time.
He had a lot to say to them, and it wasn't always just sweet, was it?
Well, yes, of course. He was very, 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 very nice to them, and he always treated them with respect, right? No, he didn't. He
very direct with the truth, man. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Whitewashed tombs who will save you from hell. In fact, the very, very concept, the very first time we hear the gospel in the New Testament is when Jesus talks to Senator Nicodemus, who was a politician and a member of the Sanhedrin. And now we see that Jesus was involved in the Sanhedrin and these politics and these politicians and all that. Now some people say, well, no, but he didn't talk about politics. He just talked about religious things. And you say, no, actually, he was way beyond that most of the time. He says, you've forgotten justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Well, what kind of justice is he talking about? He's not talking about God's justice. Why would they be involved in God's justice? He was talking about their justice. They were not dealing with people justly. And mercy, he wasn't talking about God's mercy to them. He was talking about their mercy to the poor or their mercy to the accused or their mercy in their laws. And then the final one was faithfulness. Faithfulness to what? Well, faithfulness to God's laws. He said, look, you've taken the real intent of the law and you've twisted it. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You've taken the original intent of God's laws, God's moral laws, and twisted it into something that you've created, and that's wrong. So Jesus is what we call a strict constructionalist, right? You originalists go to the original intent of the law. And so all of a sudden you realize, wait, so the law is in this thing. The faithfulness of the law is important. And then you go back to the Old Testament and you look at the Old Testament, you realize all the Old Testament laws are they're broken up into four groups. So one group is called the moral laws, and the moral laws were given by God to protect us. All laws were given by God to protect us, but the moral laws specifically were given by God to protect us. They're not there for God to feel safe. They're there for us to be safe.
And a blessing to us, yeah.
Yeah. And so now if we violate God's laws, what will happen here? So if we create laws that violate God's moral laws, will our nation prosper? No. Will there be injustice? Yes. Will people be persecuted? Yes. And that's basically taken right out of the Ten Commandments, all the laws like that. And then you realize, wait a minute, when people are persecuted, when there's injustice, is it the rich who suffer? Is it the wealthy who suffer? No, it's the poor. It's the unjustly treated that suffer. So if you care about the poor, if you care about the persecuted, you have to care about the law that put them there.
Amen.
Right? And if you go through the history of all mankind and the history of America, you'll see every time there's been a group of people that have been persecuted, genuinely persecuted. I'm not talking about BLM, right? Because we have a response to BLM, a proper response to BLM. But I'm talking about the people who have been genuinely, like the slaves, right? Genuinely persecuted. What was God's laws that freed them? Because the Bible says that all men are created equal, and it was Christians who freed them, right? So you go through all this and you go, whoa, so God is interested in politics. Jesus is interested in politics. Jesus does care about the poor. Jesus does care about there's no way you can say he wasn't involved in politics. And
right.
So I was like, well, I got to call the book Jesus is involved in politics. Why aren't you? And then I said, well, oh, wait. And then the more research I did, I realized that the real reason we're in trouble is because our churches are not involved in politics. And so that came the next line, why aren't you? Why isn't your church? Which is the name of the book. Because if the churches were involved politically, we could change America and bring it back to a righteous path.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. That's just it. Without that salt, and the meat is spoiling, and if the salt gets back to preserving the meat, it'll bring out the best flavor for everybody. That's the church doing its job. Stay with us. You're listening to At the Core.
And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. From January to August, North Korea-affiliated hackers accounted for more than 20% of all stolen cryptocurrency after stealing more than $200 million in crypto during that period of time. Since 2018, North Korea appears to have stolen more than $2 billion in crypto through more than 30 attacks. The aim? To fund the communist country's nuclear weapons ambitions. North Korea is struggling with severe economic distress as it labors under international sanctions, which include bans on financial services, which are largely intended to curb its nuclear pursuits. So it has turned to crypto heisting as a funding mechanism.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had numerous credit cards, and I was struggling with paying them off.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
I had heard about Trinity, so I made the call. They took care of all of my credit cards, and now I am completely debt-free.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
The people at Trinity are very friendly. They will do whatever you need them to do in order for you to feel better about being in a very difficult place.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Ann, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Hey friends, it's Jessica Peck, Dr. Nurse Mama, as your 1-minute parenting coach. What word or phrase did your parents use often while you were growing up that you intentionally avoid yourself as a parent? I'm talking about things like, "What were you thinking?" or "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about," or the ultimate classic, "Because I said so." The power of our words is the most deadly weapon and the most protective force we have as parents if we use it well. I challenge you to ask your kids about your frequent words and phrases. If it's hurtful, give yourself grace and space. Kids are amazingly forgiving with a sincere apology. Affirm your growth and be kind and gracious to yourself as you unlearn and relearn. I'll see you on the Dr. Nurse Mama radio show right here on American Family Radio.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Neil Mamman, our special guest today. MyChurchFinder.org is the website. And Neil, we were just talking about the salt and light. The church needs to be salt and light, and when you're salt, it preserves the meat. It brings out the best flavor in the meat. That blesses everybody.
Yeah,
which is really the whole point of My Church Finder is people need churches that are not only being salt and light, but they're equipping the saints in their church to go be salt and light themselves. Not only the pastor standing up, but they're encouraging people in the church.
So this brought me to the next time. This was a natural thing. It was interesting because it only happened this year. A good friend of ours, Dran Reese, who runs the Salt and Light Ministry, met up with Roger Ellswick, who he has 7 auto dealerships in the Texas, Louisiana area. Great guy.
Yeah.
And he had contacted Dran and said, "Hey, I want to do this website." And Dran said, "Well, you need to talk to Neil." So Roger called me up and we started on this website. And there was a bunch of things that we noted on the website. One, if people are in a church that is not biblically sound and they're tithing to it, they're enabling the enemy.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? So if they're woke or something, then. But the second part of that is if they are in a church that is biblically sound, but is not involved in stopping the tide that we're seeing, the Great Reset, the George Soros's, all the evil, the wokeness and all that, then you're still enabling the enemy indirectly.
Yeah.
So what Roger said is we've got to find a way where we identify 3 major things. And so if you go to mychurchfinder.org, you can enter your zip code and you can look for a church in your area that meets these requirements. The first requirement is it has to be biblically sound, but that is the lowest requirement. If you're not biblically sound, you get a would not recommend rating. The second requirement is that you're not woke. So you're talking about CRT, you're talking about all these different things that are coming up. You're talking how you're teaching against homosexuality and transgenderism and all these things. So you're preaching the truth of God's word, moral law. So that's 2. And if you do that, then you get a better rating. And then if you do all 3 things, which is, we think just as important, is that you are politically active. That means your pastor talks about political issues. He teaches sermons on the importance of voting. He tries to get you out to register to vote. He tries to get people out to go door to door, to be activists. Then you get the best rating. So the 4 ratings are 1, would not recommend, you're not biblically sound. C, which is the lowest rating, is you're only biblically sound, but you aren't any of the other 2. B is you are biblically sound and you're politically active or not woke, right? And I shouldn't say not woke, but you're culturally aware.
Yeah. We
assume you're not woke, because if you're woke, then you get a would not recommend. But we assume that you're culturally sound, meaning that you actually teach about wokeness. But to get the A rating, you have to do all 3. You have to be biblically sound, you have to be culturally aware and teach about wokeness and things like that, and you have to be politically active.
All right,
so
Neil.
Now, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we've got tons of pastors that listen to the program, tons of leaders in churches that listen to the program, tons of active people in churches across the country. How do they get their church on the website?
Exactly. So if you're listening to this, go to mychurchfinder.org, and if you're a pastor, there'll be an option to click. It says register your church. If you're not a pastor, but you go to one of these churches, there's a send my pastor an email option. Click on that, and it says enter your pastor's name, enter your pastor's email. And if you don't have your pastor's email, just go to the website, and there'll be a contact or something. You can punch that in. And then what happens is the system will automatically send your pastor an email saying, so-and-so has requested that you fill out the information on mychurchfinder.org. And then the pastor goes to the website, he clicks on it, he registers, and there are 45 questions that we use to identify where your church stands. Now, we don't think we'll get too many B's and C's, right?
Because they're not going to fill it out if they know they're
not going to fill it out. So
right.
it's self-filtering in many ways.
Right. and for the in a lot of our biblical citizenship modern America class is being taught in thousands of churches across the country. So those churches, we really do want them to get added to the website as quick as possible. If a pastor's listening today, or when we send this out to our coaches across the country and they take it to their pastor, what would be just an estimate if I say to, because these guys are all busy. So if I say to them, hey man, just 15 minutes, just spend 15 minutes. Is that fair? Or is it 30 minutes? What would you say it takes for them to do it?
No, I'd say 15 minutes is probably fair.
Perfect.
There's 45 questions, but you could glance at them, click. I mean, it'll take you maybe 10 seconds per question at the most, right?
Okay,
gotcha. Reading and click, reading and click, right? And then they're deep questions, but if you're a pastor, you know this stuff.
For them, it should be no-brainer. Get it, especially the ones that we're wanting to get on this site.
Yeah, the ones that we're talking about,
right?
They should know. Oh, yeah, of course, right?
Yeah,
and
you guys just launched this. I mean, this is brand new. So pastors out there that want to attract active members of their church and people that want to have an impact in the culture. What a great tool for them to get on this. Exactly. And we're going to be, not only you guys, but us and others, we're going to be promoting this like crazy. So if you're a pastor sitting out there, you got to be saying, I better get on this website. Or people will find my church. And
go
ahead.
Let me give you another good reason to fill it out. So once we started this, we were like, well, let's find out how many people actually search for churches every month. And we found out that there's something like 1.7 million searches for churches every month online.
Wow.
Just in the United States, 1.7. Now, think about that, though. That 1.7 doesn't represent 1.7 million people.
That's just one in that family.
5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's just the dad or the mom, usually a mom probably.
Right.
Most of the searches are done Sunday morning, by the way, like at 9 a.m.
Right.
High school.
Right.
It's like, we need a church. We had a big fight yesterday. We need to go to a church. Let's find a church, right?
Right.
They punch it in, or they're moving, or they're going to a new state, or they're visiting, right? Whatever. You'll find, they want to find a church. So there's 5 million people looking for your church. And here's what the exciting thing is. the liberal churches are dying, right? In the last 20 years, liberal churches have lost 50% of their audience. The conservative churches have grown by 75%. Some of the more conservative churches have grown by 175%. And the churches that took a stand during COVID have exploded. Like the church I was attending in San Jose, Pastor Mike McClure's church, Calvary Chapel, San Jose, we went literally from 250 people to almost 3,000 people in 8 months during COVID, because we refused to shut down.
Wow.
So churches are exploding. And here's the other exciting thing. If you look at the rate of growth of conservative churches, we are growing faster than the population of the United States is growing.
Interesting. Man.
So there are good reasons to be on this website, because there are people who are coming to Christ and looking for churches.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. They're hungry. This is definitely the harvest is plentiful. The workers are few, and people are hungry. They're looking, and they can't find you, pastors. I'm just telling you, they can't find you. They call us all the time looking for you. And Neil and Roger and Dran have created a tool here that will really, I think, be very effective in strengthening our churches and meeting the need for these folks. And of course, Neil, as you're saying, I mean, there's a lot of people that they just got saved, or they just know they need to be in a church. They know they're looking, and then there's a ton that are looking to change because they're tired of the woke stuff out of the pulpit.
They're in a woke church. The pastor just came out and supported Hamas.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my goodness, it's crazy, man. I'm telling you, it is that crazy. It is absolutely, man. I hate to end this because this is so good, Neil. We got to get you back. Would love to do more with you. Really encourage people to get your book, to go to mychurchfinder.org and get your church registered. Last thing before, what's the best place? Where do you like to send people for the book? I know you can get it at Amazon and bookstores, but
yeah. So it's Amazon, but the easiest place is go to mychurchfinder.org and look at resources.
Okay, perfect.
And under resources, you'll see a link for the book and a link to the video that talks about the background and everything. Excellent. And my recommendation is if you can get the word out there, then start a small group with the book and stuff like that, because people need to be educated. There's a lot of things that people don't understand about America, which is amazing. And I found out as an immigrant because I had to study to become a U.S. citizen. And it just opened up a world that most of my American friends had no idea existed. I was like, did you know this about the Constitution? They're like, no. Like, let me give you one quick one. The Constitution, people talk about constitutional rights all the time. But the Constitution doesn't give you any rights. There are no constitutional rights. You never had constitutional rights. It doesn't. The list of negative rights. It tells the government what it cannot do.
That's right.
To violate your rights. So where do your rights come from? You only have God-given rights.
God-given.
And the book explains why only God can give you rights.
Amen. So good. So good. I also see, as you were saying that, I was clicking through to the books to see you got my friend Frank Turk's book on there as well, Legislative Morality. So two great ones there. Neil, man, God bless you, man. Y'all keep up the great work, and let's get you back again soon.
Correct. Looking forward to it.
mychurchfinder.org, folks. mychurchfinder.org. Check it out today and make sure that your church gets on that list as well. Okay, we're going to switch topics to some great news. I cannot express to you how excited I am about this next topic. First of all, I'm going to admit that Tuesday, earlier this week, just 2 days ago, quite literally 48 hours ago, think about this, I knew nothing about this guy that had won the nomination in the Republican caucus to be the speaker, Emmer from Minnesota. And I asked you out there in the audience for At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Green. I said, what do you know about him? I need to know. I need to know if this guy's a good guy, bad guy. Is he a rhino? Is he going to be conservative? Is he a constitutionalist? Is he a believer? Does he have a strong biblical worldview? All those things. Knew nothing about him. Immediately, you called in and you said, hey, man, he's against the Electoral College. He's for national popular vote. He's been funded by Soros to be a spokesman for them. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Immediately looked into it, and I was like, no, this is horrible. This guy's not for the Constitution. We were so close to having a horrible Speaker of the House. And 24 hours later, so yesterday at this time, Mike Johnson of Louisiana became the Speaker of the House. Now, folks, I cannot express to you how surreal this is. You talk about going from what could have been terrible to what I believe is a reprieve. I believe is a God-ordained moment in American history. I think Mike Johnson is our Esther at this time. He was raised up for such a time as this. This is one of the good guys, folks. I'm telling you, like, not just one of the good guys, one of the great guys. He's a constitutional attorney. He said the same things that I said after the 2020 election about, what the 12th Amendment says and how the president should deal with this and why the Paxton lawsuit out of Texas was correct and why those states had violated the Constitution and all of those things. He was spot on. And he voted against those electors being verified. He has been a constitutional attorney defending religious liberty for Alliance Defending Freedom and other great national organizations, our friends, people we work with. I just interviewed Mike Johnson just a few weeks ago. We've had him. He's been a part of our legislators conference at Wall Builders. I don't know how to explain this enough. He is one of us. This is a massive victory. Talk about moving in the right direction. Okay, I want you to hear his speech because it's phenomenal. His acceptance speech, very little prep at all. This all happened in a matter of hours. He is now Speaker of the House, and yesterday, right after they voted him in, he gave an acceptance speech, and I want you to hear it. So let's dive in and listen to it.
I want to thank my dedicated wife of almost 25 years, Kelly. She's not here. We couldn't get a flight in time. This happened sort of suddenly. But we're going to celebrate soon. She spent the last couple of weeks on her knees in prayer to the Lord, and she's a little worn out. We all are. I want to thank our children, Michael and Hannah and Abby and Jack and Will. All of our children sacrifice. All of them do, and we know that. And there's not a lot of perks to being a member of Congress's kid, right? And so I want to thank all of your families as well for what they endure and what they've had to endure for the last few weeks. We've been here a while. Yeah. I want to thank my faithful mother, Jeannie Johnson, who bore me at the age of 17, and my brothers Chris and Josh, and my sister Laura, and all their families, and all of our extended family. In Louisiana, family's a big deal, and we got a bunch of them. I especially want to thank all the extraordinary people of the great state of Louisiana. We have never had a Speaker of the House hail from our state, and so they've been lifting us up. I thank the people of Louisiana for the opportunity to serve you in Congress, and I'm humbled by your continuous support. We will make you proud. To my colleagues, I want to thank you all for the trust that you have instilled in me to lead us in this historic and unprecedented moment that we're in. The challenge before us is great, but the time for action is now, and I will not let you down. I want to say to the American people, on behalf of all of us here, we hear you. We know the challenges you're facing. We know that there's a lot going on in our country, domestically and abroad, and we are ready to get to work again to solve those problems, and we will. Our mission here is to serve you well, to restore the people's faith in this House, in this great and essential institution. My dad, it was mentioned, my dad was a firefighter. He was an assistant chief in the fire department in my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, a little town in northwest Louisiana. On September 17, 1984, when I was 12 years old, he was critically burned and permanently disabled in the line of duty. All I ever wanted to be when I grew up was the chief of the fire department in Shreveport. But after the explosion on that fateful day, he nearly died, and it was a long road back, and it's changed all of our life trajectories. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. And my dad, he lived with pain all the rest of his life for decades more. And I lost my dad to cancer 3 days before I got elected to Congress, 3 days. And he wanted to be there at my election night so badly. I'm the first college graduate in my family. This was a big deal to him. And so several weeks after that, it was early 2017. It was my freshman term, and it fell to me to be in the rostrum one night to serve here as Speaker Pro Tem. I thought that was a big deal until I figured out that's what you do for freshmen late at night. And I think if my memory serves, Miss Jackson Lee was winding down one of her long, eloquent speeches. And not that I was not enraptured by her speech, but I looked up at the top of the chamber there, and I saw the face of Moses staring down. And I just felt in that moment the weight of this place, right? The history that is revered here and the future that we are called to forge. And I really was just kind of almost overwhelmed with emotion.
Hang in there, folks. We're not even to the good stuff yet. We got to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're listening to At the Core.
More than ever, pastors need to feel people's love and support. There's no better time to do this than Pastor Appreciation Month in October. And there's no better way to do it than using the Easy as 1, 2, 3 Bless Your Pastor materials, available for free at blessyourpastor.org. If your church uses the free 1, 2, 3 materials, church pastors will be offered a $300 scholarship application to attend a marriage retreat. Learn more at blessyourpastor.org. That's blessyourpastor.org.
American Family Studios was started back in 2011 as a way to advance the Christian worldview into an increasingly media-rich culture.
Media is like such a powerful tool to communicate the gospel. I love writing stories, getting in my office, and just thinking, how can we portray this concept of who God's character is? And to get to use the gifts that God has given me is really a joy.
AmericanFamilyStudios.net.
Preborn celebrates that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Roe has been responsible for the slaughter of over 63 million babies. Now the decision to abort a child will be left in the hands of the states, and sadly, abortions will continue in the most liberal states. Over the past 16 years, Preborn has positioned their clinics in the top abortion cities where 50% of abortions occur. Preborn's work of saving babies' lives continues at an even greater level as they save babies' lives and defend their centers from the radical hate groups who want to shut them down. Preborn's response is dependent on you, the pro-life community. Be a part of rescuing lives and changing hearts for Christ. $28 sponsors one ultrasound, and $140 will help to rescue 5 babies' lives. Dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to preborn.com. All gifts are tax deductible.
The Old Testament tells us about Joshua's first battle as the leader of Israel. Moses was watching from a mountain, and when he held up his staff, the Israelites would start winning. When he lowered his staff, they'd fall back. It was a picture of Joshua's need for God. After the Israelites won, God said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered." This may be the first instance of what's known today as journaling. I think God wanted to be sure that Joshua had a record of this first battle, a reminder of the true source of his power. You know, I found it helpful to keep a record of significant milestones in my own walk with God. My past journals remind me of God's faithfulness and my need for Him. So the next time God brings you through a battle, why not keep a written record of it? It'll help you remember your source of power. With Seeking Him, I'm Nancy DeMoss Walgamuth.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on At the Core with Walker Wobben and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach. And in this final segment, we're going to finish out Congressman Mike Johnson's acceptance speech as the new Speaker of the House. As I said in the last segment, this is surreal, folks. This is one of the good guys, I'm telling you. He's got the foundation. He meets the biblical command out of Exodus 18. Able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. All 4. He is absolutely capable of doing this job, maybe better than anybody else. I mean, his demeanor, his tone, his ability to reach out, and he's just so good at it. But he's not only capable of doing the job, he fears God. He's got a biblical worldview. He's grounded. Wait till you hear the rest of the speech. I mean, it is so obvious. And then, of course, as an able man that fears God and being a person of truth, that is honest, that will speak to the American people with truth, and then hating covetousness, hating bribes. This is exactly the kind of guy we needed as Speaker of the House. Let's jump right back in where we left off before the break. This is Mike Johnson giving his acceptance speech just 24 hours ago as the new Speaker of the House for the United States Congress.
Looked up at the top of the chamber there, and I saw the face of Moses staring down. And I just felt in that moment the weight of this place, right? The history that is revered here and the future that we are called to forge. And I really was just kind of almost overwhelmed with emotion. It occurred to me in that moment, it had been several weeks, and I had not had an opportunity yet to grieve my dad's passing, and I just had this sense that somehow he knew. And I had tears come to my eyes, and I was standing here, and I'm wiping them away, and then it suddenly occurs to me, The late night C-SPAN viewers are going to think something's very wrong with the new young congressman from Louisiana. It wasn't Sheila's speech. I'm sorry. I just knew in that moment that my dad, my father, would be proud of me, and I felt that he was. And I think all of our parents are proud of what we're called to do here. I think all the American people at one time had great pride in this institution, but right now, that's in jeopardy. And we have a challenge before us right now to rebuild and restore that trust. This is a beautiful country. It's the beauty of America that allows a firefighter's kid like me to come here and serve in this sacred chamber where great men and women have served before all of us and strive together to build and then preserve what Lincoln did refer to as the last best hope of man on earth. We stand at a very dangerous time. I'm stating the obvious. We all know that. The world is in turmoil. But a strong America is good for the entire world. We are the beacon of freedom, and we must preserve this grand experiment in self-governance. It still is. We're only 247 years into this grand experiment. We don't know how long it will last, but we do know that the founders told us to take good care of it. I want to tell all my colleagues here what I told the Republicans in that room last night. I don't believe there are any coincidences in a matter like this. I believe that Scripture, the Bible, is very clear. That God is the one that raises up those in authority. He raised up each of you, all of us. And I believe that God has ordained and allowed each one of us to be brought here for this specific moment in this time. This is my belief. I believe that each one of us has a huge responsibility today to use the gifts that God has given us to serve the extraordinary people of this great country, and they deserve it. And to ensure that our republic remains standing as the great beacon of light and hope and freedom in a world that desperately needs it. It was in 1962 that our national motto, "In God We Trust," was adorned above this rostrum. And if you look at the little guide that they give tourists and constituents who come and visit the house, if you turn in there to about page 14 in the middle of that guide, it tells you the history of this. And it says very simply, these words were placed here above us. This motto was placed here as a rebuke of the Cold War era philosophy of the Soviet Union. That philosophy was Marxism and communism, which begins with the premise that there is no God. This is a critical distinction that is also articulated in our nation's birth certificate. We know the language well, the famous second paragraph, that we used to have children memorize in school, and they don't do that so often anymore, but they should. G.K. Chesterton was the famous British philosopher and statesman, and he said one time, America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed. And he said it's listed with almost theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. What is our creed? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, not born equal, created equal. And they are endowed by the same inalienable rights, with the same inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That is the creed that has animated our nation since its founding, that has made us the great nation that we are. And we're in a time of extraordinary crisis right now. And the world needs us to be strong. They need us to remember our creed and our admonition. Turmoil and violence have rocked the Middle East and Eastern Europe. We all know it. And tensions continue to build in the Indo-Pacific. The country demands strong leadership of this body, and we must not waver. Our nation's greatest ally in the Middle East is under attack. The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done. We're going to show not only Israel, but the entire world, that the barbarism of Hamas that we have all seen play out on our television screens is wretched and wrong, and we're going to stand for the good in that conflict. We have a catastrophe at our southern border. The Senate and the White House can no longer ignore the problem. From Texas to New York, wave after wave of illegal migrants are stressing our communities to their breaking points. We know that our streets are being flooded with fentanyl, and all of our communities, children, and even adults are dying from it. The status quo is unacceptable. Inaction is unacceptable, and we must come together and address the broken border. We have to do it. The skyrocketing cost of living is unsustainable, and Americans should not have to worry about how they're going to feed their family every week because they can't afford their groceries anymore. Everybody in this room should think about this. Here's the stats. Prices have increased over 17% in the last 2 years. Credit card interest rates are at the highest level in nearly 3 decades, and mortgage rates are now at a peak we haven't seen since 2001. We have to bring relief to the American people by reining in federal spending and bringing down inflation. The greatest threat to our national security is our nation's debt. And while we've been sitting in this room, that's right, the debt has crossed almost $33.6 trillion. In the time that it's going to take me to deliver this speech, we'll go up another $20 million in debt. It's unsustainable. We have to get the country back on track. Now, we know this is not going to be an easy task, and tough decisions will have to be made. But the consequences, if we don't act now, are unbearable. We have a duty to the American people to explain this to them so they understand it well. And we are going to establish a bipartisan debt commission to begin working on this crisis immediately. We all know that we also live in a time of bitter partisanship. It was noted, and it's been on display here today, right? When our people are losing their faith in government, when they're losing sight of the principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world, I think we got to be mindful of that. We're going to fight. We're going to fight vigorously over our core principles because they're at odds a lot of times now in this modern era. We have to sacrifice sometimes our preferences because that's what's necessary in a legislative body. But we will defend our core principles to the end. In his farewell address, thank you. In his farewell address, President Reagan explained the secret of his rapport with people. And I like to paraphrase his explanation all the time. He said, they call me the great communicator, but I really wasn't that. He said, I was just communicating great things. And they're the same great things that have guided our nation since its founding. What are those great things? I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but let me concede to you all, I think it's really quintessentially the core principles of our nation. I boil them down to individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. Those are the foundations that made us the extraordinary nation that we are. And you and I today are the stewards of those principles, the things that have made us the freest, most powerful, most successful nation in the history of the world, the things that have made us truly exceptional. In this time of great crisis, it is our duty to work together, as previous generations of great leaders have, to face these great challenges and solve these great problems. I will conclude with this. The job of the Speaker of the House is to serve the whole body, and I will. But I've made a commitment to my colleagues here that this Speaker's office is going to be known for decentralizing the power here. My office is going to be known for members being more involved and having more influence in our processes and all the major decisions that are made here, for predictable processes and regular order. We owe that to the people. That's right. And I want to make this commitment to you, to my colleagues here and on the other side of the aisle as well. My office is going to be known for trust and transparency and accountability, for good stewardship of the people's treasure, for the honesty and integrity that is incumbent upon us, all of us, here in the People's House. Our system of government is not a perfect system. It's got a lot of challenges, but it is still the best one in the world, and we have an opportunity to preserve it. Last thing I'm going to say is a message to the rest of the world. They have been watching this drama play out for a few weeks. We've learned a lot of lessons, but you know what? Through adversity, it makes you stronger. And we want our allies around the world to know that this body of lawmakers is reporting again to our duty stations. Let the enemies of freedom around the world hear us loud and clear. The People's House is back in business. Thank you. Thank you. We will do our duty here. We will serve you well. We will govern well, and we'll make you proud in this institution again. We're going to fight every day to make sure that is true. I look forward to the days ahead. I genuinely believe in my heart that the best days of America are still ahead of us. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now ready to take the oath of office, and I ask the Dean of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Harold Rogers of Kentucky, to please administer the oath of office.
Mr. Speaker Designee, congratulations on your election.
Thank you, sir.
When our founding fathers chose a bold, new, and innovative new self-rule government, it was met by deep skepticism by the world's monarchs. They said self-rule is only a dream. Our founders said they're right. It's the American dream.
Amen.
Now it's our dream. We're in charge. The speakership of the United States House of Representatives is the crucial outpost for the well-being of the people's government, the keeper, if you will, of the dream. Sir, if you wish to assume this awesome responsibility, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter. So help you God?
I do, so help me God.
Congratulations, Mr.
Wow, wow, wow. Folks, this is a day to thank God for his blessings and his mercy. I'm serious. Drop on your knees and thank the good Lord and pray for the Johnson family and for our nation. You've been listening.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family